Though in double figures, about 14 degrees today. What about the Midlands? We're going to see a mainly dry morning with plenty of hazy sunshine. That should be nice, breezy, but it's going to be mild. Temperatures reaching about 30 and up to 15 degrees by lunchtime today. In northern England, there's going to be more cloud throughout the morning, some sunny spells though, and again on the breezy side, temperatures double figures as we approach midday, just about 10 degrees. Let's head to Scotland. Bands of showers are going to move northwards across the west of the country. It should be dry elsewhere, though, with some sunny spells. Temperatures in Edinburgh around 11 degrees Celsius today. Let's have a quick look at Belfast. And gusty winds across Northern Ireland this morning with a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers, which could be on the heavy side. Temperatures widely in double figures. So generally today, bands of showers that will continue to move northwards throughout the rest of the day, driest in the southeast. That is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. This morning, trouble with the Chancellor, a bizarre proposal from the Scottish National Party, the Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine and, of course, that French presidential election. All that to come, but first, your morning headlines.
Well, a very good morning. It is 9:30. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date today on GB News. Now, the Austrian Chancellor is going to push for a ceasefire in Ukraine when he meets the Russian president in Moscow later today. That will be the first time an EU leader has had a face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin since the war began. Ukraine is bracing for a new Russian offensive in the east. UK intelligence shows shelling continues in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, but Ukrainian forces have managed some gains. The Ministry of Defence says Russia is using unguided bombs that increase the risk of hitting civilian targets. The Chancellor has referred himself to the Prime Minister's independent advisor on ministers' interests. It's after it emerged Rishi Sunak held a US green card while in office and that his wife holds non-dom status. He says he followed the rules and hopes the review will provide further clarity. From today, millions of people in the UK are going to see a rise in their state pensions, but it won't be enough to match the growing cost of living. Pensions and universal credit benefits have increased by 3.1%, but the Office for Budget Responsibility says inflation could hit a 40-year high of 8.7% later this year. A record number of car journeys is expected this weekend, with the RAC anticipating 21.5 million trips over the Easter break. Thousands of passengers will also be travelling by rail and air. The latest figures show Heathrow recorded its busiest month since the pandemic started, with more than 4 million passengers passing through the airport last month. The Queen has revealed she was left very tired and exhausted during her bout of coronavirus in February. The monarch made a video call to Royal London Hospital this week, sympathising with a former COVID patient who'd lost his brother and father to the illness.
I'm glad that you're getting better, and it does leave one very tired and exhausted, doesn't it, this horrible pandemic.
You're up to date on GB News on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now let's head to Tom for this morning's briefing.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:33 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now first this morning, incumbent French President Emmanuel Macron will face political rival Marine Le Pen in 2 weeks' time after the candidates made it through the first round over the weekend in this funny two-round electoral system that the French have. Well, Le Pen of the National Rally, formerly, of course, the National Front, has gained ground, focusing on domestic concerns like the cost of living, while Macron's eyes have been turned to the east as the conflict in Ukraine unfolds. If Macron wins on April the 24th, he'll be the first French president to win re-election in 20 years. Well, let's talk through the possibilities now with Nathalie Vogel, a senior fellow at the European Values Centre for Security Policy, who joins me now. Welcome to the programme. This was expected, I suppose, especially in the last couple of weeks of the campaign. It's, in a funny way, a bit of a rerun of what happened in 2017. Will the result likely be the same?
Well, hello, and thank you for having me on. Yes, well, this was expected, and yet there were some surprises. One of them being the level of people who didn't show up to vote. We are speaking of 25.1%, which is quite a large number. And the second surprise is the rise of the far left movement of Mélenchon. Which garnered some substantial results as well, 21.9%. Yes, this is a kind of something of a déjà vu with Emmanuel Macron facing Le Pen in the second round. Yet it is still another context. We have a president at war who has literally refused to campaign to a certain level. He was quoted repeatedly saying, je serai candidat autant que je le pourrai et président autant que je le devrai, which translates into I will be a candidate as much as I will be able to, and a president as much as I have to. And indeed, he hardly campaigned, yet won the majority of the votes. And what happens now is what the French called a Republican shield. It's something of a reflex of the moderate parties to back the more moderate candidate in order to prevent a radical or extremist candidate to win the election. And this is what is happening. All major candidates who've been defeated, who won't be at the second round, have called for supporting Emmanuel Macron, except for one, Zemmour. It was expected, who expresses verbis literally demanded his voters to support Marine Le Pen.
Although this
is what we can expect.
Here, is it not? Listening to the way in which various candidates have said what their supporters should do, those that didn't make it through to the next round. Looking at some of the mainstream candidates saying that people should explicitly support Macron. But then you get other people like Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who has said that people should not vote for Le Pen, but hasn't explicitly said that people should vote for Macron. And that could be a very important change. If the Mélenchon supporters, 20% of those who voted, stay at home, That gives Le Pen a serious chance.
Indeed, and you have a point there. Yet this time, he did that previously in 2017, but this time he repeatedly, 3 times said, she should not be elected. She should not be elected. She should not be elected. Literally like that. And then said, I will not, something along the line of infantilize my electorate and demand them to back the other candidate. So yes, it's a kind of a reluctant support. But you are right. There is a danger there of Macron failing to get this support. However, I think that kind of the French political culture is kind of has this kind of system that safeguards the election and prevents extremist candidates from winning the election. The danger is there. And I certainly will not predict exactly the outcome. As I said, the intentions give 51% for Macron and 49% to Le Pen. It's very close. It's going to be a close call. But it's not. Not everything is lost in my eyes.
No, and certainly as this argument develops between Macron and Le Pen, and potentially more scrutiny is applied to the candidates, perhaps Le Pen, who's been focusing entirely on the cost of living, on the domestic agenda, perhaps things will turn more international, where Le Pen has a pretty checkered history when it comes to associations with the Russian Federation, for example. I believe she pulped 1.2 million leaflets last month that prominently featured photographs of her shaking the hand of Vladimir Putin. Might this become a larger election issue in the last 2 weeks of this race?
Absolutely. As I said, the president is a president at war currently. And foreign policy-wise, if you look at it thoroughly, every single candidate discovers somehow his inner de Gaulle during the campaign. They stress the aspect of sovereignty, of strategic autonomy, of an independent diplomacy. And let's face it, none of these candidates are genuine Atlanticists. We had, on the one hand, Macron claiming that NATO was brain dead in the past in an interview. And then we have Marine Le Pen, who claims that she will be withdrawing from the integrated military command of NATO. But there is a big difference, and you're totally right, between the two, is that while the stance of Macron is more declaratory, Marine Le Pen has openly displayed her support for pro-Kremlin views in the past. She came out very reluctantly recently, only criticizing the attack on Ukraine. There is also the question of the funding of the party in the past. So yes, you are right. Those are two different sides of the medal, and certainly, the foreign policy legacy of Macron is, in the eyes of many Central Eastern Europeans, a sheer disaster with regard to Ukraine, with them downplaying the threat, ignoring the warning of British allies and of US intelligence as well. And it culminated recently in Macron insulting the Polish prime minister, calling him an anti-Semite, with the result that the French ambassador to Warsaw was summoned by the Polish prime minister. All this is not quite a bright, shiny legacy on the side of Macron. But Armageddon would be if Marine Le Pen were to decide over the foreign policy as a president and be entrusted with the nuclear power. That would be Armageddon.
It is an absolutely extraordinary situation where those former two largest parties have fallen right down to almost negligible shares of the vote. And these two parties that were either didn't exist or were considered to be dangerous jokes just some years ago, well, they are now at the fore. Well, Natalie Vogel, thank you so much for joining us, talking through that fascinating story. Of course, the French voted on Sunday, and again, in 2 weeks' time, they'll vote for those final two candidates. Well, moving on now, the UK growth numbers slowed more than expected in February. The British economy advanced by just 0.1% month on month in February, falling short of the predictions. Well, driving factors amongst this include falls in the production of transport equipment, electrical power generation, and the extraction of crude petroleum and natural gas. Well, what does this mean for us? Our business and economics editor Liam Halligan is here with more on this. Liam, why did it slow? Is it just production, or is there something more here?
Well, it's certainly not due to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because these numbers predate the Russia-Ukraine conflict. As we came out of lockdown towards the back end of last summer and into the autumn, Tom, the global economy, you still had lots of what we call supply chain issues. You know, ships were in the wrong places, factories had been mothballed, workers had left jobs and they weren't coming back, and so on. And so there was a huge increase in demand around the world last autumn and into the new year, and the economy still couldn't get into gear. And that's why you see the production numbers quite bad. Services aren't doing too badly, but we thought we'd get a month-on-month increase of 0.3%, that's a third of 1% from January to February, but we only got 0.1%. We're meant to be in the middle of this V-shaped recovery, this astonishing bounce back. The economy was meant to expand by 6% this year. That's what Rishi Sunak said last autumn. That's not going to happen. And when there's less growth, that means there's less business confidence, less investment, there aren't so many jobs around, and it also means there's less tax revenue to pay benefits and other ways to support all of us through these difficult times.
That's really concerning. So 1/3 the rate of growth that was expected, and that's before Ukraine. So
that's right.
When we add in Ukraine to this whole mess for the following month and the month after that, probably slower growth still. That's a remarkable turnaround from last year when the UK was the fastest growing economy in the G7. To what extent will policies like tax rises, of course, coming in this month, knock that further?
Well, it's worth saying that today is a really big day if you receive benefits, if you receive the state pension, if you receive a whole range of other benefits under the sort of universal credit auspices, because today is the start of the new tax year, so benefits are uprated. And when you have slow growth, there's less tax revenue around, as I said, and we know that inflation is now 7 or 8%. The cost of living is increasing by 7 or 8% a year. But benefits today are only going to go up by 3.1% because they're linked, as we've discussed before, Tom, to what inflation was the September previously. That's just the way we do things in the UK. What does that mean? Well, if you're currently on the basic state pension, the old basic state pension, it's higher than the new one, but the old basic state pension, that's £179.60 a week. If you were increasing that today in line with where inflation's going to be this year, according to official estimates, so maintaining the cost, maintaining your living standards, if you rely solely on the basic state pension, you should be getting an extra £13.30 a week from now on. What you're actually getting, because we've uprated it only by 3.1%, is £5.55. So you're getting less than half of the increase that you should. But it's not just pensioners. Pretty much all benefits are only being uprated by 3.1%. Usually that would be a chunky increase, but not when inflation is 7 or 8%, where it currently is.
I remember we had this discussion several months ago where you said that inflation is going to become the biggest political story domestically. And I have to say, this is going to run and run, is it not? This is going to be something incredibly heavy weighing on people's minds. It's a very tricky beast to tackle with, not just in this country, but across the Western world as well.
It is a global thing. I mean, when we launched my On the Money show, which is 1 to 2 every day, in fact, today we're doing a special 1 till 3, 2 hour On the Money because of these issues we're discussing. When we launched that back in September, Yeah, the first monologue we did was inflation is going to be a really big issue. It isn't just a UK thing, not by any means. Over the weekend, the UN, the United Nations, their Food and Agricultural Association, very highly regarded research group, they said that food inflation in March alone across the world, in March alone was 13%, right?
Wow.
The basic price of foodstuffs like wheat, barley, grain, all the really basic stuff that feeds into everything else. 13% inflation in 1 month. Now, that was linked to Russia-Ukraine, because Russia-Ukraine invasion...
Breadbasket of the world.
It began at the end of February. But when we're talking about 13% food price inflation a month, the notion that we're upgrading benefits for pensioners and other vulnerable households by 3.1% a year is a bad joke.
Well, it's a serious situation. No doubt you'll be exploring more of that at 1 p.m. We'll look forward to that show, Liam. But for now, thank you so much for joining us here on The Briefing this morning. Now, turning over to the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. On Saturday, the Prime Minister visited Kyiv in footage that has been seen all over social media of both Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky wandering deserted streets of the capital. The two walked past Independence Square and past a monument to the Heavenly 100 heroes who died in pro-EU protests in 2014. Now, while in Ukraine, Boris Johnson received a warm welcome and pledged armoured vehicles and anti-ship missiles to Ukraine. Today, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer will meet President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. It'll be the first time an EU leader has met face-to-face with Vladimir Putin since the war began at the end of February. Well, joining me now to discuss Boris Johnson's trip is Bohdan Nahalo, a political analyst, journalist, historian and chief editor of the Kyiv Post. Welcome to the programme. Boris Johnson walking those almost deserted streets with Volodymyr Zelensky by his side, surrounded by several members of the Ukrainian army, guarding, holding out their guns. It was an extraordinary sight, something no Western leader has yet done. What's the meaning of this for the people of Ukraine?
Well, Tom, thank you for your continuing interest. Actually, they walked past the street where I normally live. I'm evacuated right now because of the war. Don't call it a conflict, as the Russians do. It's a very bloody war. I think it sent the signal that despite the advances the Russians have made, although they're bogged down at the moment and we're awaiting a new offensive in the east, the president is confident in Ukraine's position. He's confident that Ukraine will hold out. He's confident that he has the support of key allies in the West, and he obviously sees Britain as in the forefront of that support for Ukraine. Well, both of them, are not your standard politicians, as we know. So they made a gesture. Zelensky's an actor. He's very much into PR, so is Boris Johnson. And I think it was a very good statement, in effect, to calm people down, to reassure them, and to let Ukrainians know that they're not on their own. Boris Johnson said quite a few things in his speech and during his meetings. Basically, he was saying also that, look, when this nasty war is over, you can rely on Britain to help you rebuild your economy. And in particular, we would like to play a role in rehabilitating, restoring, rebuilding Kyiv. So, I mean, if you want, in shorthand, this is a continuation of the strategic partnership that Britain and Ukraine concluded just after or just before, I can't remember, when Britain left Brexit. It was one of the first things that Britain did after it formally withdrew from the EU. So, in terms of new coalitions being built, including Poland, the Baltic states, well, obviously the US, Boris, despite whatever, reputation he may have at home, a controversial one, he's certainly liked and regarded as a true friend and hero.
It was remarkable seeing the Ministry of Defence in Ukraine tweet the words, "Be brave like Boris," calling on the rest of the world to almost follow in the example. of the United Kingdom. It's quite remarkable how the United Kingdom in general, and to be frank, Boris Johnson in particular, are received in Ukraine compared to other leaders of France, of Germany, of other large countries in Europe. That doesn't always filter through to home.
I'll interrupt you immediately. Britain for Ukrainians, they're Churchill, the bulldog breed, fighting on the beaches. You know, Ukrainians seek inspiration from the rather than look at Dunkirk, they look at the Battle of Britain, they look at, you know, the finest hours, and they get a lot of inspiration. And it just so happens that Boris Johnson is the current leader of Britain and that he's reached out to Ukraine. That has been accepted. And as I've pointed out, whatever the domestic politics in Britain and the nuances there in Ukraine, that doesn't matter. He's regarded as a true friend and somebody who's prepared to go that extra mile to assert that friendship, to demonstrate that. You know, coming to Ukraine in a train from Poland, you know, is a heroic act. It's not the only, he's not the only person that's done that. You know, the day beforehand, the leaders of the EU did the same thing. They came to Kyiv. And on the same day that he was in, that Johnson was in Kyiv, we had the Austrian Chancellor was also in Kyiv. But, you know, Johnson has gone further than anybody else, apart from probably Biden, in terms of saying we're not just talking about supporting you, we're actually helping you in practice with arms, finances, moral support, etc.
What does the personal relationship between Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky mean here? Because, of course, as you mentioned at the start of this interview, they're both not from central casting, shall we say. They are they're people who had media profiles of their own, quite personable people. They seem to genuinely have a friendship. They talk almost every day on the phone together. Is this a stronger personal relationship between these two men than other leaders around the world?
I think it has grown into that. It has developed into that. I think that genuinely Zelensky is very grateful for the support that Johnson has been consistent in showing. And I think at the same time, Zelensky has grew disillusioned with, say, Macron. He had a very close personal friendship with Macron. They were both outsiders who made it and became presidents. And I think his first major visit abroad was to Paris. But that seems to have cooled because both Macron and Merkel at their time played up to Moscow in the Normandy format, and we had a stalled so-called peace process, which has led to what we have now. And also, I think that there was this frustration that Macron kept knocking on Putin's door in the last few weeks and basically was almost made to look a fool with Putin rejecting his calls that he applied diplomacy rather than rockets, you know, in solving the issues between Ukraine and Russia. So I think that he has become the closest friend that Zelensky has on the international scene. Biden, after all, is older. He's he plays by different scenarios. You know, he's from another generation. Whereas Johnson is open, impulsive, unpredictable, like Zelensky.
Fascinating relationship to explore there. Well, Bohdan Nihalo, thank you so much for talking us through that historic visit and those remarkable pictures as well. Now, just finally today, Nicola Sturgeon is opening the door to Scotland having the youngest parliamentarians in the world, as her party plans to lower the age at which an individual may stand for election from 18 to 16. While the voting age has already been lowered in Scotland to 16, currently only adults can stand for election. I have to say this is a remarkable ideological inconsistency. It's really interesting to look at the issue here because what has been happening is that the Scottish Government has been actually lowering the situation whereby people may stand for election, but raising the age at which people may have to stay in education. There was the named persons scheme, that controversial scheme as well, and indeed suggestions that the age of criminal culpability could rise to 25 as well. A really remarkable situation tension and inconsistency there between what people may do in politics, but also what people may do in their personal lives. Well, we'll try and explore some more of that later in the week. Coming up, it's To The Point with Patrick and Mercy. That's it for the briefing today, but first, here's the weather.
So let's have a look at the forecast and how the UK is looking. Mostly dry in the east, a few showers in the west. Let's look at the details. Scattered showers will continue to move across southwest England through this morning. Some on the heavy side, I'm afraid. There's going to be plenty of sunshine far away from these, though. Let's head over to the capital in London. On the breezy side across southeast England and the London area, it's going to remain dry with plenty of hazy sunshine. Let's move over to Wales, and now there's going to be a band of showery rain pushing northwards on the windy side as well, with temperatures, though, in double figures.